What do you call a world that remembers you better than you remember yourself? That was the first thought that crossed my mind when I saw the old USB stick sitting at the bottom of my drawer, dust clinging to its faded blue plastic. I hadn't touched it in years, maybe a decade. Its little metal tongue was scratched from too many swaps between computers that no longer even exist. Something about it made me curious enough to plug it in. When the folder tree appeared on my screen, most of it was junk, half-finished homework files, screenshots of memes, and random text documents with names like Plan 2 Final. But buried in there was one file that made my chest tighten. World 1. No numbers, no tags, no underscores. Just the default name Minecraft used back in beta when you didn't bother renaming your save. I double-clicked. The launcher stuttered, coughed, and somehow still worked. When the world loaded, my screen was swallowed by the blocky horizon I hadn't seen in years. It was like opening a window into my childhood. I spawned standing on a small hill of dirt. My first dirt hut was still there, barely bigger than a closet, torches crooked on its walls, a crafting table wedged in the corner like it had been waiting for me. The grass was that old sharp green, the sky flat and washed with nostalgia. For a second, I just stood still, hands trembling over the keyboard. Then I noticed something odd. A chest sat in the hut. I swear I never placed one there. I opened it, expecting junk, maybe old stone tools. Instead, it held a single map. The map was blank except for one word scrawled across it in the old blocky font: Start over. My stomach nodded. Did I make this? I couldn't remember ever using maps back then. And if I did, why would I leave myself a message? I stepped outside into the sunlight, gripping the map, when I saw another detail I didn't remember. Right next to my hut was a wooden sign sticking out of the ground. The text read, Sam says go to the cave. But Sam hadn't played Minecraft with me since 2012. Sam. The name pulled me backward in time like a minecart hitting a powered rail. Sam was my best friend online during those years, before sports, school, and real life carved their way between us. We built silly things, half-finished castles, a mall, made entirely of cobblestone, a roller coaster that always derailed. He was the one who convinced me to try the infamous 404 challenge seed. I hadn't spoken to him in almost 13 years. But the sign looked fresh. Not weathered. Not glitched. It wasn't the sort of garbled nonsense corrupted chunks sometimes spawned. It was neat, deliberate, centered. Sam says go to the cave? I turned slowly. At the edge of my memory, I recalled a cave entrance not far from spawn. Back in the day, we used to joke it looked like the mouth of a giant, yawning zombie. I trudged across the pixel grass, listening to the old sound of footsteps, clunky, somehow flatter than the modern version. Every crunch underfoot was a piece of 2011. The cave was still there. Its entrance dipped into shadow, torches lining the walls, but something felt staged. Too perfect. The torches burned evenly, spaced 3 blocks apart. That wasn't how I placed torches when I was 13. I was messy, chaotic. Sam, though? He was meticulous. At the cave mouth, a chest waited. My throat tightened as I opened it. Inside were 4 gravel blocks, a stack of torches, and a book and quill. My cursor hovered before I clicked it open. The book contained only one line, written in stark black letters: drop the gravel. The air around me felt heavier, even though it was just pixels and code. My mind raced through the memory of the 404 seed challenge. Drop gravel, expose the cavern, descend into the dark. But this wasn't that seed. This was my world. Why was it behaving like an echo of something else? My hand hesitated on the mouse. Was I really going to follow the instructions of a message that shouldn't exist, written by someone who hadn't been online since I was a kid? I placed the gravel. The ground rumbled. 4 blocks fell into place, exactly where they needed to be. Beneath, the floor gave way. A staircase of dirt and stone opened into the earth like it had been waiting all these years. And from deep below, I heard it, a faint, steady thump. Like a note block repeating in rhythm. I stood at the rim of the new stair, Breathing like that would help my avatar see better. The thump came again, spaced like a heartbeat, or a metronome for someone who had all the time in the world. I placed a torch, then another, and the cave accepted them with the resigned patience of stone. The staircase was rough but intentional, a mix of dirt ledges, exposed coal, and a single patch of gravel that looked theatrical. I nudged it with my shovel. The gravel gave, and an entire curtain hissed downward, raining pebbled pixels. For a second it felt like old YouTube tutorials, grainy, griping about lighting bugs, someone whispering, "Okay guys," into a cheap mic. I climbed through the opening it left, and entered a chamber shaped like a throat. On the far wall, a redstone torch bled its eerie light onto a contraption that could only have been built by us. Messy, curious, almost working. A loop of dust fed into a note block. Every few ticks, the signal pulsed, and the block answered with a hollow wooden pop. Thump. 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 It wasn't random. I stepped closer, counting under my breath. 4 pulses, pause. 3 pulses, pause. 5 pulses, longer pause. It scratched at a memory, how Sam used to hide messages in everything. Our signboard jokes. The way he'd make piston doors that only opened if you walked to the beat of whatever song he was obsessed with that week. A chest sat beside the clock. Inside, spare redstone, 3 torches, flint and steel almost worn out, and a map I didn't recognize. The map wasn't of the cave. It was of the surface, zoomed close, a coastline scribbled like a jawline, and in the corner someone had drawn a tiny lighthouse using wool and hope. Over the top, in shaky letters, "Follow the count." I let the loop run and paced the chamber, watching the dust blink alive and die along its trail. 4, 3, 5. Then 2, 2, 1. Then 4 again. Coordinates? Directions? Steps? I tested it like a puzzle someone else should have solved already. On pulse 4 I turned right, on pulse 3 I walked forward, on 5 I placed a torch and waited. It felt silly until the wall to my left reflected an extra shimmer. There was water behind gravel there, sealed by a younger version of me who thought secret bases were only real if you hid them from yourself. I broke through. Water peeled out in a tidy sheet, filling a pool like a careful effect. The torchlight rippled. In the far corner, a sign bobbed against the stone. "If you found this, you're me. Keep going." Under it, another chest. I opened it and froze. Inside were rails, powered rails, a minecart, and a single green record with a cracked label. Disc 13? The note block thumped on, patient as a heartbeat. Somewhere above us, rain began to fall. Or maybe that was just memory entering the room. I pocketed the disc and the rails and followed the old instinct. When in doubt, build the track. The chamber's floor made a gentle slope toward a narrow passage. I laid rails in a glittering line and boosted it with the precious powered segments I'd hoarded like candy back then. A lever here, a redstone torch there. The cart clinked against the curve and waited, dumb and faithful. "Okay," I said to no one. To Sam. To the cave. I placed the cart, climbed in, and pushed. The world obliged. We slid into the dark to the cadence of the note block's ghost, the wheels chattering on joints that never got smoothed by updates. My torchlight threw long ribs across the tunnel. The air felt colder in the way caves always do, even when you're just a person at a keyboard in a warm room. The tunnel broke into a vault of stone that had no right to be pretty. Stalactites weren't a thing back then, but the ceiling still managed its cathedral trick. In the middle stood a column where lava once flowed. Someone, me? Sam, had capped it with glass that didn't quite match the texture pack I remembered. At the base, the rails veered left under an arch that my future self might have called too square, but my past self would have called perfect. At the arch, a sign, "Slow here, seam ahead." The cart ticked over a detector rail and lanterns sparked to life along the ceiling, old Ara lanterns that were really just glowstone boxed in trapdoors, proud of their make-believe. Beyond the arch, the stone changed shade like a mood swing. The chunk border. I could see where the cave generation had stitched beta to something later, a seam knitted by algorithms that didn't send invitations to each other's birthdays. The rails crossed it anyway, brave and janky. Another sign, listen. I stopped the cart, slid out, and waited. At first I heard nothing. Then, like a foghorn heard through 3 doors, a distant waver of sound. Not a song. The shape of a song. I took out the cracked disc 13 and the flint and steel, and understood. The old ritual, sound travels weird in caves, play the disc, watch where the echoes lean. I set a jukebox, the one I'd tucked inside the chest in a fit of foresight I didn't remember having, and slid the disc in. The cave swallowed the first crackle like a secret keeper. Then came the hiss, the near melody, the fragments that used to scare me in a fun way when I was small and brave right before bed. The echoes bent right. I followed them on foot, hand on the wall, until my torch showed a ladder shaft tucked behind a curtain of vines I never planted. A last sign at the base of the ladder. Bring a coat. It's windy. Sam. I laughed, because caves don't have wind. But I climbed anyway. Halfway up, I felt that little trick the game does when you're near daylight. The palette eases brighter, the soundscape thins, the promise of sky leaks down. I reached the hatch and pushed. The world hit me with gray ocean, wet grass, and a cliff that wore a staircase like a scarf. Far out on a jagged headland, a tall, awkward lighthouse leaned into the weather as if listening. Its roof was wool. Its lens was nothing yet. And somewhere inside, something clicked to the beat I knew. The wind wasn't real, but it felt like it had an opinion. Rain blew sideways off the water in thin dashes, a texture that belonged to another version of the game, and still managed to look like weather. I ran along the cliff path, hearing old footsteps sounds and the mutter of spiders under stones that would stay day quiet until night. The lighthouse grew with each turn, a child's drawing executed with adult stubbornness. Its base was cobble, middle ring smooth stone, cap made of red wool because back then we thought red meant official. The door creaked like nothing in the code ever creaked, which is to say I imagined it, and the world agreed. Inside, the floor was planks arranged with the earnest symmetry of someone who counted everything. A spiral stair hugged the wall, and every landing had a sign. Landing 1, sorry about the stairs. Landing 2, we'll fix them later. Landing 3, don't look down. I looked down anyway, grinning and a little sad. Halfway up, I found the mechanism. A note-block array ringed the central void, fed by a redstone clock that pulsed at the same patient tempo as the cave thump. There were gaps where blocks should be, like missing teeth in a smile we planned to fix. In the corners sat another chest. Inside, wool, glass panes, redstone dust, a book and quill with pages numbered and most of them blank. The first page had Sam's handwriting, or my best imitation of it from a lifetime ago. If it's raining, the light should sing. I climbed the rest of the way. The top room was open to the see-through glass that didn't quite meet corners. The lens was just an empty ring, waiting. Weather pressed its face against the panes. The sound engine faked a howl I believed anyway. I remembered the stupidly ambitious plan: hook the lighthouse to a weather detector, which we didn't really have, fake it with daylight sensors and timers, and whenever it rained, the tower would play a melody that pointed to our next big build. A breadcrumb generator, disguised as civic infrastructure. Thunder rumbled. I placed glass in the ring, wired redstone along the rafters, filled the no-block gaps using the counts from the cave. 4, 3, 5, 2, 2, 1, 4 again, then primed the clock. The first pulse wobbled the tower like a breath. The second set the rhythm on its feet. On the third, the melody found itself, not disc 13, not disc 11, but a chord progression Sam used to hum while waiting for smelting. It climbed and fell with the grace of something simple and earned. Out across the water, my old rail line cut a straight, proud path along the shore, stone pillars, torches every 6 blocks, the kind of line you build when you think speed and purpose are the same word. The melody leaned toward it, insistent. Another sign waited behind the ladder, too easy to miss unless you knew we never resisted a dumb hiding spot. If you're me, take the cart. If you're not, hey, take the cart anyway. Below, near the base, a shed I'd ignored on the way and turned out to be a tiny depot, chest of minecarts, spare rails, a furnace that still held a single lump of coal. I set a cart, felt the rain, and thought about how a world can hold a person's outline long after they leave. The track faced east, where the sky already looked brighter. I climbed in and let gravity give the first push. The rails accepted, old and sure. The melody from the tower followed like a promise you intend to keep. The rail hugged the coastline like a sentence that didn't want to end. Every few blocks, a torch blinked past, my old metronome of progress. The rain kept up, low and purposeful, turning the ocean into a field of tiny hands. We skimmed through inlets and over little stone bridges I'd over-engineered with pride. Once, the track dived into a tunnel that had sand for a ceiling. I remembered how many times it had caved in on us, how many frantic pillars we jammed up to hold the beach in place. You could almost see the panic fossilized in the layout. Along the walls, I started noticing signs. No creepers beyond this point. Torch tax 1 torch. Sam owes me 9 iron ingots, don't erase. The last one made me grin in a way that hurt. On cue, we burst out into open air, and the rain slackened to a mist. The track curved inland through a birch stand from a version of the game that hadn't learned subtlety yet. The leaves were a uniform green, like someone colored with a single crayon across the whole page. A hill rose ahead, the rails climbing with it. At the top, the world hiccuped. To the left, bright beta grass, to the right, a calmer, deeper green. A chunk seam ran down the hill like a stitched scar. The cart tapped over it, and the sound changed. Tiny, but there, old footstep, new footstep. I felt it in my hands more than heard it. At a plateau, we rolled into a wayside stop, a 3x5 shelter with a roof of stairs and a chest for tickets. Inside the chest, of course, was a note. Stop 1, Skybridge of doubtful purpose. An arrow sign pointed toward a ladder set into the side of a cliff. I let the cart go and climbed, counting rungs like I used to count nights until an update. The skybridge wasn't elegant. It was a line of cobble and slabs stretching across a ravine, with fences slapped on one side because I didn't know symmetry yet. The bridge ended at a dirt square topped by a single oak sapling in a flower pot. A sign. Someday this will be a tree garden in the sky. Another sign, smaller. Don't delete this. S. Windless at this height, the world still felt like it breathed. Far below, the rail carried its little rhythm east. I stared at the sapling and thought of all the somedays we shelved and all the ways a game taught us to say later. The melody from the lighthouse was memory now, but it persisted in the shape of the path. East, east, east. I climbed back down to the station to find a fresh minecart sitting on the line as if I'd left it there minutes ago. No, as if someone else had. The chest had one more scrap of paper tucked under the tickets. Keep to the coast until the Big Bend, then listen for the rain again. Big Bend, coast, rain? I took my seat, nudged forward, and let the old world carry me where the next, someday, waited. We hit the bend after a long silvery stretch where the track balanced on pylons over marsh. Slimes used to spawn here unpredictably, and I swear I could hear their rubbery optimism even if nothing bounced in the fog. The rails leaned inland, crossed a creek with a grunt of wooden ties, and then skirted a bay that looked like a bitten cookie. Half buried in sand near the waterline, I saw the roof of a structure I hadn't thought of in years, the Turtle. It was our first attempt at a mob grinder, a square box on legs with a water belly and a sign that promised drops. It had never worked right. Sometimes it emitted a single feather like a charitable cough. A ladder poked up through the roof as if yawning. I stopped the cart. Inside, the water still circulated in stubborn squares, refusing to learn fluid dynamics. A tiny cascade spilled into a drop shaft lined with signs to slow mobs we never coaxed into compliance. On the observation deck, I found another note in a chest. I'll fix this when I understand everything. Me, probably. Under it, a second line in different handwriting. Understanding is a moving target. Build anyway. S. The grinder clunked like an old fridge, and then, hilariously, popped out a single bone. I laughed, and pocketed it. On the wall, A third sign I truly didn't remember hung crooked. If it rains, lighthouse melody points to the shore rail. If it's clear, nether. The weather had eased, but the clouds were still the color of shrugging. Back on the track, we skimmed along dunes. The big bend announced itself the way undertows do, slow, then suddenly urgent. The rails swung around a horn of land and the ocean opened into something wilder. Ahead, a signal tower of stacked pumpkins with jack-o'-lantern faces grinned over the coast. We used those when we ran out of glowstone. We called them shore teeth. At the base, another jukebox waited, sheltering under half slabs like a dog in rain. Beside it, a chest with only one item, neatly centered, Disc 11. The cracked one. The myth one. I held it, aware of 13-year-old me and all his borrowed courage. A final sign leaned against the box. Play only if you want to keep remembering. Memory is selective. Nostalgia is even more so. But I'd come this far to stop pretending. I slid the disc in. The first hiss braided with the surf. Somewhere in the dirt, something clicked. The sound didn't scare me, it located me. Echoes climbed the cliffs and pointed inland toward a cleft I'd always considered decorative. The rails didn't go there. My feet did. Torch, torch, torch. I squeezed into the cleft, the audio artifact tracing the walls like fingernails on a map. The passage kinked right, then right again, then opened into a low tunnel with a floor of obsidian we hadn't mined yet. A portal frame waited at the far end, complete but unlit. The flint and steel in my inventory felt heavy with timing. I struck, and the violet veil bloomed. On the obsidian floor nearby, one more message scratched in cobble. Cobble catwalk. Don't look down. I smiled despite myself and stepped into the sound of old fire. The nether received me like an airport at 2 a.m., humming, weirdly empty, and full of stories about to miss their connections. Old nether is a specific smell in my mind, sulfur and toast. The portal deposited me on a cobble pad bristling with torches. Out beyond it, a catwalk stretched thinly into heat shimmer, fences along one side only, because once upon a time we ran out of sticks. I could taste the feedback whine of the portal even with the gain volume low. The lava ocean below burped in orange squares. Ghasts sang their wail cries somewhere out of sight. At the start of the catwalk, a sign read, "Run if you hear a ghost." Another, "If you fall, hit escape and walk away." Classic us, mixing survival tips with therapy. The catwalk jogged left, right, left, threaded through stalagmite cuboids that pretended to be geology. Every few dozen blocks, a tiny rest stop waited, 2 slabs, a chest with a little food, and a note. Snack break. Drink water IRL. One of them held a gold nugget label, coined for the ferry, because Sam had a mythology for everything. Halfway to wherever, the path intersected a cobble hub, 4 spokes, signs over archways. Fortress, unsafe. Quartz, future. Farm, loud. Home, don't break. The farm. Corridor rumbled like a big stomach. Zombie pigmen grinder that never achieved consensus on ethics. I followed home. We entered a carved-out tunnel lined with bracing like a coal mine, lit by redstone torches that made everything look like a photo lab. The walls bore tick marks in pairs, every 20 blocks, a little tally and a date. Most were from 2011 and 2012, then a handful from 2013, then a gap like a breath you don't want to take. After the gap, 3 fresh tallies with today's date, and a 4th, tomorrow's. I stared at that last mark a long time. A glitch? A joke? Or the world's way of telling me it was keeping time without me? The tunnel opened into another safe room we once thought invincible. Double doors, lava moat, ceiling too low for ghasts. In the middle, a chest sat on a wool carpet the color of caution tape. Inside, a compass, useless here, flint and steel, bread, and a book. The book contained coordinates for the overworld, scrawled with our shared impatience. X2048, C-512, lens. X2304, C-256, rail. X2560, Z0, museum. Museum. We used that word every time we didn't know what to call the big build. I flipped the page. A second list. Things we will finish. 1. Lighthouse lens. 2. Tree garden. 3. Museum map room. 4. Apology. I stood very still. Around me, the nether fussed and simmered. Redstone torches blinked their tiny heartbeats. Somewhere in the generator distance, a gas laughed, which is to say the code told it to. When I closed the book, the room felt smaller. I tucked it away and stepped back onto the catwalk, because the only way out was through. The sign over the homeward arch added one more line I hadn't seen coming in. Look for the sand glass. S. I didn't know what a sandglass was in nether terms until the corridor kinked and the wall opened into a basalt chamber where soul sand poured in a slow cascade from a broken ceiling. It wasn't physics, it was impression. The trick we'd built, a loop of dispensers fed sand into a drop, reversed by pistons so it never ran out. It looked like time making itself. Under the sandglass, a humble portal frame gazed back at me. The old catwalks converged on it as if bowing. I took a breath, squared my hands on keys, and stepped into the static. The overworld returned with a cough of light and birds that were really just code for daytime. I materialized inside a small, cobble gazebo with a view that stalled me mid-breath. Before me stretched a map wall, 8x4, stitched into a panorama. The coast on the left like a sleeping dragon, the inland on the right braided with rails and rivers. Item frames held stained glass over certain maps, marking points of interest in a language we invented at 13 and didn't bother to translate. Beneath the wall, a row of chests labeled with our old style of optimism. Blocks all. Food plenty. Redstone math. Someone had realigned the signs recently. They sat too straight, too centered. On the work table, a single compass pointed, pointlessly, and a clock floated between day and weather like a coin that wouldn't land. Pinned to the map's bottom edge with an item frame was a paper strip crowded with little arrows and numbers. The arrows matched the note block pattern from the lighthouse. The numbers matched the coordinates in the nether book. A title scrawled in that familiar tall handwriting. Project Museum, Wings, Rails /SEAs /Memory. I stepped closer. The rail wing occupied a peninsula shaped like a hook. The sea wing extended along the bay and out to a little artificial island we'd squared off with sand. The memory wing sat inland at the end of a road lined with birch, with a tiny square labeled Quiet Room. We were children with blueprints. We were also right. Next to the map, a sign. If we get lost, follow the chunk seams. Another. If we disagree, both versions get a room. How many arguments had we paused with rules like that? A doorless arch led to an exterior path of stone brick. Moss crept in the corners like thought. The path forked, left toward the rail wing, right toward sea. Straight ahead, a gravel road to memory. The gravel tempted me with crunches I'd missed. The rail hummed with promise because I could imagine the mechanical satisfaction of making it sing. The sea beckoned with light on water that didn't use shaders and still knew how. I looked down. On the threshold stone, a small, easy-to-miss plaque read, "Finish one thing perfectly." The kind of instruction future me needed. Past me must have known. A soft patter began on the gazebo roof. Rain again. The lighthouse melody was too far to hear, but its idea arrived with the weather. In rain, follow the shore. Sea wing first, then. I tucked the map strip into an item frame slot inside my inventory, glanced once more at the panorama, and took the right-hand path, into the sound of water speaking an old language. At the first bend, a new sign waited, wood fresh, text crisp. Good choice. As the curve beyond it revealed a half-built colonnade, pillars marching toward the bay like they had somewhere to be. Between them, empty frames waited for maps we never filled. In the distance, the square island wore a crane skeleton made of fence posts like a crown. And somewhere between the pillars, a door stood ajar that we'd never installed. The door led nowhere at first glance, 1 block thick, open on both sides, standing alone like an art piece about patience. But it hummed gently, even in a version of the game before blocks hummed. I stepped through and the air changed temperature in my head, which is to say my memories lined up differently. On the other side, the colonnade's emptiness looked curated rather than abandoned. Beside the doorframe, an embedded note block waited, paired with a lever. A sign above it. "Press if you want to hear the day we planned this." My finger hovered. I pressed. The block thumped out a progression so simple I could see the room we'd been in. My family's old desktop, its fans roaring, Sam on a voice call that kept crackling, both of us talking over each other about docks and ships and a museum where the ocean could walk indoors. The notes weren't an audio file. They were a mnemonic device we'd built for ourselves. I felt a ridiculous prickle behind my eyes and laughed it off, alone among pillars. The sea wing arced toward the water on a causeway of stone and wood. Gaps in the floor revealed the bay's square pulse. I crossed, palms a little damp on keys, and reached the island. We built a dry dock, a rectangular basin with floodgates that were just pistons in a trench, but we believed. A half-ship sat on keel blocks, its ribs curved wrong in a way I recognized as charming and fixable. The crane wore a chest at its top, daring me to climb and loot it like a rooftop present. I did. Inside, prismarine shards I didn't own and couldn't have had in 2011. And a book newer by texture. Borrowed from the future. Put them back if it feels wrong. I stared at the shards, a color my old world never knew, and closed the lid. We were telling ourselves not to retrofit our past with tools from later. Not to cheat the learning curve. At the island's far edge, sand sloped into water. A line of sea lanterns lay placed under the surface like runway lights, then halted abruptly as if someone told them to stop before the anachronism bit. I waded in up to my waist and followed the unlights toward a small cave entrance below the pier. A ladder rose inside. At the top, a compact map room with 4 tables, 1 made, 3 blank. On the finished table, a map of the bay with a red X under the pier. A sign beside it. "Dig here for the sound of rain even on clear days." I dug, expecting joke treasure. Sand slumped into a neat shaft. At the bottom, a single daylight sensor sat under a glass pane, wired via thin redstone to a buried note block that played a gentler version of the lighthouse riff whenever the sky dimmed. Clouds, dusk, or storm. The block sang once when I uncovered it. I closed the shaft and felt like I'd put the roof back on something holy. Back in the map room, another book waited with crisp pages. Sea Wing Curation Guidelines. The title read, in Sam's tidy tall letters. Rule 1. We don't pretend we finished everything. Rule 2. We finish one thing perfectly. Today, choose. Down the ladder, the half-ship leaned, a promise and a dare. Inland, the gravel road to memory gleamed wet. Left along the shore, the rail wing dozed under a line of oak. I closed my inventory and let the sound of square waves decide which promise I would keep first. I chose the half-ship because unfinished vessels are metaphors that build themselves. The keel was a spine of spruce, the ribs oak. The stern had a charming lopsidedness like a wink. A chest near the bow held a scatter of stairs and slabs, wool, fences, and a single sign that read, "Build slow on purpose." I could feel 13-year-old me roll his eyes at that. I laid the deck with measured patience, counting block rhythms aloud. The rain returned, thin and earnest. Each placed plank answered with that old wooden thunk that I can still pick out of any soundscape. I curved the hole with stairs, stepped back, adjusted by one, did it again. The ship found its line the way handwriting does when you stop trying to impress and just write. For the mast, I resisted the later temptation of banners and used what we used to use, wool and fence posts. The first time I hoisted the square, it looked like a bedsheet. The second time, it looked like a sail. I laughed softly in my empty room. Underfoot, the dry dock pistons hummed like old refrigerators as I tested the floodgates. Water surged in a polite rectangle and paused at the right depth, as if grateful for the choreography. I tied off imaginary ropes to fence post cleats, and allowed myself the satisfaction of calling something done without quotation marks. A little plaque on the bow, already made in a hand too neat to be original, waited for text. I typed with the seriousness of ceremony. Little Thursday. No idea why the name popped in. Maybe because so much of childhood felt like waiting for weekends, and we learned to love Thursdays because they meant almost there. Back in the map room, I placed a copy of the ship's map into a frame labeled "Finished." A redstone lamp above it blinked on with a quiet applause I felt in my chest. 2 more lamps sat dark. I walked to the edge of the island with the rain. The lighthouse far behind me ticked through its melody. Across the bay, the sky brightened over Birch. The memory road glistened and waited. There is a tenderness to completing something small that makes the next choice seem less impossible. On the causeway back toward the mainland, a news sign glowed wet. "Good work. Now come see what we kept." As the handwriting was unmistakable and also impossible. The gravel road to memory crunched under boots that didn't actually exist. Birch trunks passed in a metronome of white bars. Along the way, I found frames set on posts, each holding a map zoomed comically close. A corner of a farm, a corner of a room, a corner of a joke. Under each, single-word captions. "Try." "Almost." "Here." I didn't know where to put the knot in my throat, so I walked faster. The path ended at a low building of smooth stone and glass, half sunk into a hill. Above the door, letters in wool, MEMORY. Through the window, I could see a long hall and, at the end, a small square with a bench. The quiet room. I stepped inside, letting the door sigh shut behind me, and braced for the shape of a feeling I hadn't named yet. The memory wing didn't shout, it sorted you gently. The long hall carried displays on both sides, as if we were our own archivists. On the left, tools and frames, the first iron pick we'd repaired too many times, a stack of gravel named Trust Fall, a boat called Don't Breathe. On the right, screenshots reproduced with blocks, pixel art of moments we'd saved, the night we saw auroras, except we hadn't, and so the sky was just lapis and glowstone. The time a creeper photobombed our victory pose. Halfway down, a list carved into signs took up a whole wall. Things we said we'd do? I ran a finger along the titles as if that could count as progress. Tree Garden. Map Room. Rail Museum. Lighthouse Lens. Apology. The last one had a tiny arrow pointing to the quiet room. The quiet room was exactly what it promised. A square with a bench, a chest, and a window angled at a patch of birch and sky calibrated to calm. I sat on the bench as if that would make the pixels softer. The chest contained only a book. No title, just pages that began with S. S. If you're me and you sat here, it means you didn't delete this world when you were angry. Thank you. S. If you're not me and you sat here, hello? We probably never met. I wanted to finish the museum before I had to go. I didn't. That's okay, but it doesn't feel okay. S. Memory is a liar, but it lies kindly. I left you routes, rails, rain songs, seams. Follow any of them. Finish one thing perfectly. Then leave one thing perfectly unfinished so you remember how to be gentle with the younger us. The next page had my voice from long ago, messy letters, uneven spacing. Me. I don't want to write an apology. I want to make a big thing and then everyone will know I meant well. S. Make a small thing and mean it. Then write the sign anyway. Pages after that were blank. The windows showed weather deciding. The bench accepted my weight. In my inventory, the maps, the discs, the compass all weighted like coins for a machine you had to build yourself. When I stood, I knew the rail wing had to be next. The world had been subtly pointing me there since the lighthouse sang. And the signboards along our lines had always been where we joked the most, and I needed to laugh the way you need to drink water. On my way out, at the hall's end, a door I didn't notice on the way in clicked softly. It led to a maintenance corridor, bare stone, unlit, unpretending. At the end, a small alcove with a sign. Server's not dead. It just remembers. Beneath it, a button. If you're ready. I pressed because that is who we were. Pistons fired somewhere under the museum, a weight shifted, and far away, too far to be real and exactly real enough, I heard my cartwheels begin to turn. The button's echo chased me outside like a rumor gathering proof. By the time I reached the main path, a faint rattling threaded the rain, my carts nudging into alignment somewhere I couldn't see. The gravel road bent left toward Birch, but the rail wing's entrance pulled at me. A stone arch with iron bars set decoratively like teeth and a plaque. Rail, speed, memory, jokes. Inside, the first gallery was half platform, half exhibit. On the wall, framed track variants stood like family portraits. Plain rail, powered rail, detector rail. Beneath each, a sign with our old commentary. Plain, honest. Powered, show-off. Detector, tattletale. In the corner, a glass case contained a relic labeled the Booster, that pre-1.6 trick where two micarts kissed and flung each other faster than code intended. A sign underneath read, "We believed in physics we invented." Beyond the exhibits, two actual lines waited, Coast Loop and Inland Spine. The Coast Loop would hug familiar shores, the Inland Spine speared through hills where we'd once sworn to build stations. For every biome. And then got distracted by cake. Overhead, a line of lamps flicked on one by one, the world politely announcing, service restored. I stepped onto the platform, cart ready, rails gleaming like sentences we'd meant to finish years ago. The lamps overhead pulsed in rhythm with the old lighthouse song, slower, steadier, as if the entire world had agreed on a tempo at last. I pushed off, and the cart rattled forward, carrying me past framed signs and glass cases that blurred into a museum-long goodbye. The Coast Loop whispered of salt and storms we never coded. The Inland Spine promised stations we never built, still waiting with patient coordinates. Every click of the track sounded like a word, still here, still here, still here. When the cart finally slowed, it left me at a small terminus with no plaque, no exhibit, just a bench facing the sunset, its wood grain worn by nobody and by everyone. I sat. The sky bled from orange into the deep blue we never had shaders for, and the lighthouse beams swept across the bay in square syllables. The museum, the rails, the wings, the rooms, all of it settled into a silence that wasn't empty but full. I didn't write a final sign. I didn't need to. The world itself had already carved one across every block and every joke we left unfinished. Server's not dead. It just remembers. I saved, I closed, and I let the rails keep their rhythm without me.